Hello everyone, this is Robert and this is the Gweike Cloud CO2 laser. In the first video I did kind of an unboxing and a basic feature overview. In this video I want to kind of structure this more like a buyer's guide. So what I'm going to go into are things that you would consider if you're thinking about purchasing something like this. So I'm going to do a competitive analysis of kind of every laser on the market that's similar to this, kind of pros, cons, feature list, things like that. Talking a little bit about diode lasers versus CO2 lasers, what are some of the differences. I want to discuss a little bit about who the target audience is, and then go over a couple other little details. So check the chapters, skip around, as always, find out what's interesting to you. And then for the third video, I want to go into the actual kind of performance of it. And the reason I'm saving that video for last is because it's a CO2 laser. It's going to shoot out a laser beam, it's going to move it around, and that's pretty much all there is to it. My personal opinion is most CO2s are going to pretty much operate the exact same way, so the cutting and the engraving performances are largely going to be identical between all of them, but this, in my opinion, is the more critical aspect of it, the features, the prices, what they include, what they don't include, the software, things like that. So this is kind of more the important video to me. The third one is going to be, it's doing the thing that we all expected it to do. So let's dive right in and get started. Okay, I already said this in the beginning, but I'm going to say it again. Please use the chapters, skip around. This video might end up getting a little bit wordy. There's going to be a lot of discussion and a lot of talking. First category I want to talk about is who this laser is for. If anyone knows me in my personal life, in my real life, they know that I do a lot of research. And even before I do any of these sponsorship requests, I do a lot of homework ahead of time. So a lot of the stuff I'm presenting in this video is stuff that I figured out ahead of time before I even said yes to this. So who is the target audience for something like this? You have the diode lasers, and I've done a few of those reviews. That's kind of your entry level, and we'll talk about that a little bit more later in the video, but they're basically low power, hobby, occasional use. That's kind of how I see it. They don't really have good fume extraction. They're open, the air assist is kind of wonky on some of them. They're just going to smoke up your whole shop, and they kind of have a special little need. Then you move up to something like the K40 style, and I'll have a picture of it right here. This was really popular, and this was actually my first laser. These are claimed to be about a 40-watt laser, but I think in reality it's about 30 to 35 watts. And this is kind of, my first CO2 laser. It is a good entry level into CO2 lasers, but it comes with a lot of downsides. These can be had for, I don't know, $500 or $600. The prices are always changing, but to cool it off, you're going to be putting literally an aquarium pump in a bucket of water. You're not really going to have good fume extraction. The controller is, well, just awful. So, there's some caveats to it, but there's definitely a step up in power from the diode lasers. Then you have something like this segment, which is kind of more for that entry-level crowd, the people that are kind of graduating from the diode laser up to something a little bit more powerful, a little bit more serious, a little bit more professional. And then you have a lot of these types that are made more for the smaller workshop, less industrial, less bulky, it's not this big 150-pound thing. And then you have the higher level above that, which are kind of the industrial, I'm calling them industrial lasers, the 60 or 80 or 100 watt big things, kind of more like what I have. They're very big, have a much more complicated and involved controller in them, generally much more higher power, and the options and accessories like air assist, water pump, cooling, exhaust, those are kind of separate features that you kind of got to add on. And they're very, very large, but they also have a much larger cutting area. So this kind of sits right in the middle of the diode laser, the K40, somewhere in between is this segment, and then you have the big industrials. This is the first kind of consumer level CO2 laser that's out there. The K40 was kind of that, but it really wasn't very consumer friendly. So this is for the people that want to graduate from the diode laser, but really maybe don't have the room or the workshop or the need for like a large industrial laser. And those can be had for relatively inexpensive, but the cheaper ones have really poor build quality, quality control, and then the much nicer ones are very expensive. So I think this fits right in the middle of that category. All right, so let's talk about the elephant in the room, CO2 versus diode laser. I think there's like 4 main aspects that I want to talk about, so let me try and remember those and get through them. First up, you have the power difference, and I'll kind of go into this maybe last because it's the most complicated. You also have what types of materials they can cut, you have the price, and then you kind of have form factor. In terms of price, a 10-watt diode laser is going to cost anywhere between, let's say, $500 and $800 at the time of filming this video. So significantly cheaper than something like this at around $3,000. There's a huge price gap, but there's also a big difference in power, 10 watts versus 50 watts. This is a little 10-watt module off the Ortur LaserMaster 3, and really at the end of the day, all we're doing is taking laser power and moving it around on an X and Y gantry and shooting it down at something. So the amount of power that you get is dramatically different for the price, and I'll get into that. Then you have kind of the form factor. A CO2 laser is generally always going to be this enclosed thing which has significantly higher safety benefits. You don't have to sit there and wear goggles and worry about like stray laser reflections, things like that. Also smoke, you don't have to worry about the exhaust just kind of filling up your whole shop. Every single time I do one of these diode laser reviews, the shop is just, I have to vent the whole thing out. It's really annoying. Air assist, a lot of these features are just kind of built into CO2s. There's a lot more complete package that you're getting. However, you lose the benefit of just being able to take this 20-pound thing, slap it down over your workpiece and hit go. There's pros and cons to that. So let's talk about what you can laser with either one of these. A diode laser has a different wavelength than a CO2 laser. It's not all just the exact same laser lights, they have a different wavelength. And the wavelength for a CO2 laser can penetrate a lot more materials. Generally speaking, if you can cut it with a diode or engrave it with a diode, you can also do it on a CO2, but not vice versa. For instance, they always talk about black acrylic as being able to be done on a diode. They say that because you can't do clear. It will not penetrate down through clear acrylic. It just passes right through it, whereas something like a CO2 laser can absolutely do clear acrylics. And I'll have a full list, a link to something down below that kind of gives you a comparison, but you have a lot more options as to what you can cut and engrave with a CO2 laser versus a diode laser. Let's talk about power. So I'm going to try and kind of keep this as brief as I can, but it all comes down to power density. So let's say we are engraving something or cutting something. If we're engraving something and it's going back and forth, boom, 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 we're going to ultimately set the power of the laser as to what works for the depth and the material and all that stuff. So if we're moving at, I don't know, 100 millimeters per second and we're at 100% power with something like this, we're putting 10 watts into it at this speed, well, guess what? If you've got 50 watts at your disposal, you can speed that up. You can go theoretically 5 times faster. Generally, you're going to be limited to the speed of the machine because it's really hard to engrave at full power because still too much power is hitting the workpiece. It's kind of just basic feeds and speeds. Whatever laser power hits, you have to be moving fast enough to where it either cuts the way you want it to or engraves or etches the way you want to. So when I'm doing cutting with something like a 10-watt laser, it's moving at literally maybe a few millimeters per minute. It's moving very, very, very slow, and that's at 100% power. When you have an extra 40 watts at your disposal, you can move a lot faster than that. So that's really all it is. It's just a matter of the energy density that you're putting into the workpiece. If it's cutting, you can cut deeper. If it's engraving, you can engrave a lot faster. And it's not exactly a linear, 10 watts to 50 watts is a 5x, but it's pretty darn close. You can just go a lot faster with something like this. You can cut more materials, and you have just a greater range of options of what you can do in terms of engraving and cutting. Okay, so let's talk about what other lasers are kind of in this segment. whenever I go to buy something and do my own research, I always kind of, try doing a little bit of Googling and find out what else exists. So I did a lot of searching of like 40-watt lasers, 50-watt lasers, things like that. Also looked at the competitors to see what ad keywords they were buying off, and I made this little handy chart to kind of consolidate everything for you. This took a significant amount of time, so please pause the video and really pore over this, because a lot of these specs are not listed, and in some cases like Glowforge, they don't really publish things. So I literally read everyone's manual to try and pull things out. I even called tech support in a couple of cases to try and figure some of these things out. And here's what I came up with. I'm going to separate this into 3 basic categories. Kind of the price, because I think that's worth talking about, the basic features, and then everything else. So let's go ahead and start with price. So we've got a couple different competitors here. We've got obviously the Gweike Cloud, we have the FSL Muse full spectrum laser, then we have the Glowforge, and then we also have the Flux Beambox Pro. And there are some different variants on here, like I think there's 3 levels of the Glowforge, there's a couple different levels of the Flux, there's the Beam and then the Beambox Pro, but I'm including only the ones that really kind of make sense as a direct comparison. So if we look at price, you can see that there's a pretty big range here, and I did include my coupon code because, I mean, come on, that's why I'm doing these videos, but I do have my coupon codes, so if you don't want to use the coupon code for whatever reason, you can just add $200, so it becomes $2,850 and $3,200 respectively, and yeah, maybe that makes things a little bit closer. However, if we go down to the bottom, you see the apples to apples category. I tried to compare these in terms of price as fairly as possible, I guess. So looking at the features for the Gweike, it includes the cooler, the air filter, the air assist, the exhaust fan, and the camera. So I tried to normalize all of these, and it's interesting. Now, I actually did this before I said yes to the review, and this is kind of the reason I said yes to it, because the price difference is massive. So if we look at the FSL Muse, if we take the Muse 3D, which has a camera, add on an exhaust fan, add on the air filter, the basic one, and then add on the rotary, because to be fair, at $3,000 for the Gweike Cloud Plus Pro, you do get a rotary. If we add that on, we get $83.94, so about $8,400. If we look at the Glowforge, we take the Glowforge Pro, which is most equivalent to the Gweike, and then we add on their air filter box, because technically the Gweike does come with an air filter box. We get $8,300, and then if we look at the Flux Beambox Pro, we get $6,300 once we kind of similarly equip it. So this is kind of crazy. The price difference between $3,000 and then $8,000 to $6,000 is massive, and I'm going to go into this in a little bit more detail, but the Gweike really is just an exceptional value when you really look at it in a table like this. So as I said earlier, you should definitely kind of pause this and pore over it and, do your own research and look at the sites yourself to see if I missed anything or have anything wrong here. But the Gweike is really smart in how they portrayed their laser. It comes with a camera, it comes with an exhaust fan, it comes with a laser cooler, which is built internal, and it has the air filter and air assist included. This is something that no one else is really doing. If we look over at the Flux Beambox Pro, the only optional thing there is the air filter, but that is, several $100s more, and their base price is $5,000. And they're the only ones that are doing a 50-watt laser. Everyone else is doing this 40 or 45-watt laser kind of thing. So it's really interesting when you look at those included accessories. The Gweike really includes the most. The Flux Beambox Pro does have a little bit larger work area, but it's pretty similar between all the others. And then if we look at the pass-through, I think the Gweike and maybe the Glowforge probably have the best pass-through. However, the Gweike and Glowforge have kind of the exact same pass-through situation. It looks like they're kind of copied off of each other, so that's kind of interesting. If you absolutely need rotary, you're going to be limited to the Gweike, or I think the Flux Beambox Pro, the FSL does have a rotary attachment, but you basically have to raise the whole machine up. They kind of have this box that sits underneath of it, and then you need to add a new lens, and you basically shoot through the whole laser through the bottom, and then the rotary sits underneath, which is kind of interesting. And it's a $1,400 attachment plus the lens, so it really, really raises the price up substantially. The Glowforge does not have an option for a rotary because they have a very short focal length. Basically, the whole thing is very slim, so they just don't have the room to do it. That's the same issue that the FSL had, and they got around it by just having a module that sat underneath of it. So now let's talk about software and some of the other stuff. We could also rename this section why I really, really dislike Glowforge, and if you're watching my channel, you should not buy a Glowforge. So in the case of the Gweike Cloud, you have a cloud software which, quite frankly, is pretty bad. And I'll talk to this a little bit more in the software section, but it's not very good. I don't like it. It's probably par for the course. It looks very similar to everyone else's, but I really dislike it. You also have an offline version, which is a bit different and actually looks pretty decent. And then you have the option to use Lightburn, which is a huge selling feature for me. So you have those three options. If you look at the FSL, it says self-hosted, and this is where I actually had to call tech support. They're not really clear on this, but the machine is interesting. It actually has its own web server internal. You actually log into the machine, and the laser software is actually built into the machine, which is actually kind of interesting. So they're not using cloud, and they're not really using a standalone. It's all just hosted on the actual laser, which is pretty cool. I'm going to talk about Glowforge last. Flux Beambox has their own kind of proprietary software. I didn't download it and give it a test, but you know, it looks pretty similar to everyone else, and it is an offline software. You don't have to have like a cloud subscription. Glowforge. Glowforge uses a cloud-based only service, which means you have to use it in their cloud online. You have to be internet connected to use it, which I just think is garbage. I hate it when companies do this, and this is a reason enough not to get the Glowforge. In addition, they say that they don't charge for it. However, to do what I think are basic features, you have to upgrade to the premium service. And you have to be a Glowforge customer and log in to view that pricing, but it is a monthly price. And I am not going to sit there and sign up and figure it out, but they give you such features like, oh, prioritized server. So if it's taking a long time because it's cloud-based, you can upgrade to the premium and you can get those files uploaded faster. It's just terrible. I really, really hate when companies do stuff like this. So I think, you know, they're all pretty similar other than Glowforge. I think Glowforge loses hard in the software category, but I really like what Gweike is doing. They're allowing you to use Lightburn, which is a really good software. It's probably my favorite. I did include warranty in here because I just kind of wanted to highlight what Glowforge Basic is doing. The Basic is an interesting product. They're basically crippling it a little bit. They're only giving a 6-month warranty. The base model, and this is according to them, has worse cooling, has slower speed, and downgraded hardware. So they're basically taking the Glowforge Pro and crippling it a little bit, and then giving it a 6-month warranty so that you save $2,000, which is just fantastic. The only other things I wanted to talk about is everyone kind of includes an air filter, and admittedly the Gweike is very basic. It's probably on par with, who else had one that was kind of basic? It's maybe only worth a couple $100. The Muse comes with their Cool box, which seems very similar to what the Gweike includes, and it's pretty basic. I wouldn't put too much stock into their air filter. The Glowforge is $1,200 or $1,300 for the air filter, and the other ones are kind of similarly priced, and that is more on the level of with the Gweike one that's about $1,000. So take that into consideration. There's some yeses up top in terms of what it includes, but the air filter that the Gweike includes is very different than like the $1,300 air filter that some of the other people have. So just something to take into consideration. So how do we sum this up? Well, I think we kind of got to get the elephant out in the room is Gweike did provide this laser for review for me, and I am being, compensated by that for doing these videos. This isn't my money that I spent. So take that into consideration. Know that I am not an impartial third party in this. That's why I wanted to put this list together, because I think the facts really speak volumes. If you're looking at this strictly from a value proposition, there's really nothing else on the market right now that offers the same amount of value that this laser provides. At that $3,000 price range, I think the only thing that it really suffers on is it doesn't have as nice of air filter box assembly as some of the competition has. And I think that's about it. Software-wise, the fact that you can use Lightburn and you can use their offline software, which kind of feels like a variant of Lightburn, the software looks good. The air assist, you can add an additional air assist if you really care. That's a pretty easy thing. There's just a fitting on the back. You can add your own. The camera's decent. The exhaust fan is probably one of the better ones. So really, when you go down this list, it's not that deficient. I think maybe not having that control panel on top is something that I would have liked to have. That, in terms of hardware, that is the one thing that is kind of a big gripe. And the FSL Muse and the Flux Beambox Pro both have those options. But when you really start looking at it, you're losing a little bit of laser power in terms of the FSL Muse, and it's a couple $1,000s more. So I don't know. I think this comparison really kind of drives the point home. And it also drives the point home that Glowforge is just screwing over their customers. They're offering an inferior product, and they're putting it all behind the paywall of this cloud software. Granted, you don't have to buy the premium, but the fact that you have to be on Wi-Fi, you have to connect. And I like that the premium has an option that is unlimited storage. Like what, you're gonna have 10 files and they're gonna oh, now you need to buy premium. I just hate everything about them. I hate how they do business. I hate their business model. I hate their product, and I hate what they're doing to products like this. So that is my real thoughts on Glowforge, and I think only a chump that's ill-informed would be buying a Glowforge. You have other options here. You've got an FSL, you've got the Flux. If you, for some reason, don't want to go with the Gweike, you've got other good options. Just don't buy a Glowforge. That's my takeaway. If it's not already apparent, I think it's worth saying that I'm not doing this video for any entertainment value. This is purely informational for anyone that is looking to make a purchasing decision. And a couple people had mentioned the software aspect of things, and I did dig into that a little bit more, and here's what I have to say. It does work with Lightburn. There's a couple little quibbles. The autofocus. The autofocus doesn't work the way you'd think it would work, and all of these lasers are the same. They have autofocus, but they're using cloud vision system to read a QR code to find out the material thickness and then do an offset on the laser. Just sit with that for a second. They don't just probe it and go, boop, that's where the material is. You'd think they do that, but they don't. And this is just something that all of them do for whatever reason. I know that the, what's the really nice, Epilogue. The Epilogue lasers do that. They just kind of probe the material and boop, you're done. I don't know why they don't do it this way, but you have to basically enter an offset into Lightburn or your software for whatever that depth offset. So not a big deal, but that took me a little bit to figure out. The integration of Lightburn is totally fine. I'll go into that more when I do the actual using this video, the next video. But I do have a link down below that shows how Lightburn works. It's from them, but it clearly outlines the whole thing, and it's going to be more involved than what I'm going to do because that video already exists. But it works the way you would expect it to work in Lightburn, so pretty cool. The cloud software, it's not worth talking about. It's not usable. I'll be really honest, it's garbage. I hated every minute of using it and almost threw my laptop out the window. It's really bad. It's very slow. There's a lot of lag. You click a button, you have to wait. It's just not the experience that I would want. Sure, you can download little templates and cutesy projects. That's not what I'm here for. That's not how I'm using the machine. Maybe it's something that works well for you, but it's not how I'm going to be using the machine, and I don't think it's kind of how my viewers are going to be using the machine. So The cloud software, I'm just throwing that out completely. It was never a consideration for me. The offline software works perfectly fine. It's what I would expect. If you don't want to pay the money for Lightburn, the normal offline software works perfectly fine, and I have another video down below that kind of gives you a little bit more of a tutorial on that. So as far as the software goes, I'm perfectly fine with it. I wish there was a control panel, because that's really what I use on mine more than anything, is the control panel. I just go in Lightburn, do my thing, do all my layers, send it, and then I use the control panel. So that's the big thing I'm missing, is that control panel. And yeah, that's all I gotta say about software. So I've been doing YouTube long enough to know that people are very cynical and they might think that I'm trying to pull one over on them. So I want to leave this video with one last thing, and that is actually confirming that this is in fact a 50-watt laser. I have this laser power tester thingy here, and basically you shoot a laser beam at it, the temperature increases, you do some math, and you can figure out how much power there was in the laser. Pretty simple. That's why I have the front open. That's why I have a piece of wood inside that is hitting that interlock switch to undo the safety features. And you can see here in the video, I'm waving this thing around, and I end up getting a 24-degree rise over the course of 20 seconds, which for this laser power meter means 24 times 2, that is a 48-watt beam that was hitting it. Now you might be thinking, 48 is less than 50. I'm paying for 50. Why am I not getting 50? Well, it's due to the nature of how I'm measuring this. As you can see from the video, I'm waving it inside of here, and that is the last reflection of the CO2 beam. You're supposed to measure it right at the output of the beam, which is over here. It basically outputs out of the laser tube, hits a mirror, then hits another mirror and goes down. I'm not able to get inside this path without disassembling the laser, which I don't want to do. If I were to measure it right here, I would definitely get higher, because each time you reflect off one of those mirrors, you're going to be losing a little bit of power. So just something to take into consideration. But 48 watts out of this, that's great. That really makes me happy. And once again, I'm very happy that that happened, because I don't want to be spending all of this time doing these videos just to find out that this is actually a 40-watt laser. No, this is actually a 50-watt laser. So yay, thumbs up on that. Up until this point, I haven't obviously done a lot of engraving or cutting or anything like that with it, but I have done all this stuff off camera. There's no big gotchas. You know, I'm not going to release this third video and be like, okay guys, it's actually a 30-watt laser and it doesn't actually do the thing. Once again, it is very easy to take a laser beam and just move it around over top of something. That's super easy. The fact that it's 50 watts, we're golden. So in the next video, I'll kind of cover more of the using of it. I'll do some engraving, do some cutting, but spoiler alert, it's gonna cut, it's gonna engrave, it's gonna do all those things. So whew, this was a big video. Anyway, thanks for watching. If you have any questions, post them down below, of course. Of course, use the coupon code. But as always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.